Perfect. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Em. I'm one of the librarians here at Rockland Public Library, and we're thrilled to be hosting tonight's author talk. Before we get started, I want to note that tonight's program will be recorded, so please keep camera and microphone off for the duration of the event. There will be some time for questions at the end, and we will get to those as we get to them. I want to start the night off as usual with a land acknowledgement. Though we're meeting digitally over Zoom, the library is built on Wabanaki land. I also want to note that the next couple programs that we're hosting at the library in the upcoming weeks. Next week on October 28th, we'll be hosting an in-person poetry reading with Dave Morrison to celebrate the release of his new collection. And the following week on November 4th, we'll be co-hosting our second Camden Conference community event of the season with William Hall. And I'm happy to turn it over to Shirley and Dana, who will be discussing the book, The Gatherings. They are co-authors of the book, and they will be discussing their experience writing it, their experience in these meetings, and providing their perspectives on the sort of settler Penobscot or relationships in these meetings and in co-authoring the book. So I will turn it over to them, and you two go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Em. And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. 35 years ago,
I don't know how to use a different speaker.
I'll start again. 35 years ago, I had an experience that changed my life and helped to direct the course of my life. In 1986, I became involved with an organization that had started up in Maine called the Center for Vision and Policy. Its goal was to bring people together to create a vision for Maine. In fact, the whole Gulf of Maine bioregion that would blend together ideas of social, economic, and environmental justice into a model of how we could all live here sustainably. One of their first decisions, a pretty unique decision for the time actually, was that the voices of the Wabanaki people should be part of this vision. And we set out to find those individuals who might want to be part of this effort. We began a year of seeking out interested Wabanaki, including my friend Dana here, to help us think about how to begin. The result of all these conversations was that the center sponsored a kind of educational forum over a weekend where we invited Wabanaki individuals to speak to a largely non-native group about their history and our shared history and current issues in their lives. We repeated this forum a second year, but at the end of that event, the second event, which I had organized, I was approached by several Wabanaki participants with an invitation. They said, "We think this effort has promise, but we'd like to propose that we meet in a different way." They said, "We'd rather not be up in front of you as speakers and you down there, the audience, but rather we propose to meet in a more traditional way, a way we would be more comfortable in a circle, around a fire, and including ceremony to help in our deliberations." They said, "We'll take care of that. We provide the way in which we meet, and your job would be to find the location and get the people there." And it was at that point that everything changed. And so I'd like to invite my friend Dana here to share. Dana, why were you interested in being involved in this? And what was it like for you and for all of us being in the circles together once we started meeting that way?
Well, first off, it puts every one of us on the same plane. There's no hierarchy. There's no leader. There's no boss. So everybody had equal say and equal time. And as the book is titled, is that let us sit together and talk. Because there was many non-native people who felt that they'd like to ask some questions and not be confrontational or anything like that. And myself, I was a strict opponent to the land claims process. So I needed to sit and talk with adults because I had spent a lot of time with children talking about our culture and who we were. And so I felt I needed to connect, and I offered my time and energy to be part of that connection. And here we are today in 21, and I'm still here.
Yes.
So we felt that it was a good way for us to have people come and participate, because a lot of people, if they go to a powwow, is not what we were putting forward. We were putting a talking circle together and a ceremonial circle in a ceremonial way. And that went from daybreak until sunset, that we could be at a position in a place where we could sit and spend the day together, sharing meals, crying together, talking together, hugging together, whatever. It was the time that we felt was that we offer, and I, as an Indigenous elder and in our clan, felt it was time that we offer some words of encouragement to the non-native people about who we are and what we are in this land of ours that we own today. And so that has basically put me in a position where I offer up my help. And I have a daughter that offers up her help for the youth of the country and in the world, and doing a similar thing, but for the children.
And how you describe our time together is exactly how I remember it. And we met, I think people would be interested to know that we met, we would have 4-day weekends. And that initial educational forum, we did one, and then we did one the next year. And then when we made the decision to start meeting in a council circle, people said, and we need to meet more often. So for twice a year, for these long 4-day weekends where we all camped together, we did this for another 9 times and over a total of about 6.5 years. And it was life-changing and very powerful to just sit in those circles, to have a circle that went on all morning and then break for lunch and make lunch together and come back and sit together all afternoon with no agenda, just passing that talking stick around and sharing our lives. And it was like a spiral that went deeper and deeper, I think. And the connections that were made in those circles, we started to do things together outside of those circles. We visited in people's homes, we helped out with projects, and we're talking about people who lived from Cape Cod to Halifax, Nova Scotia. We traveled long distances to do this, right? So those connections that we made have lasted for years. And the gatherings ended in 1993. And in 2008, a group of us came back together to think about writing a book about our experiences. And I thought maybe, Dana, you might share a little bit about what that process was like for you, and how you recall that we started to do the book together. You were an integral part of that.
Well, I think it was the food that got you interested.
It didn't hurt.
We had a great gathering at my home planning session, and it was the idea was to interview each member who has been actively participating and put their thoughts to words, and that way there we'd have an idea of their input to this whole process. So we felt that would work. And at the same time, when we did have events, and there was a lot of people that attended, and they attended because they they liked the idea of being able to be part of a ceremony. I mean, the politics weren't in the circle. You know, this was a spiritual thing to many people, and the connection was made for many of them for the first time. And to be able to see that happen, and for us, and after all of these years, myself, I mean, on top of what we did there, you know, meeting with each other and talking, and they taking notes and talk some more, then we edit notes and we edited, we would go back and forth until we felt that we had an opportunity to say what we wanted to the people, or people that would be interested. And so, and that's how we kind of moved at that time.
Yeah, and you know, it means a lot to me to hear you say that, because when we started out, we, as a group, we originally identified 10 people, and then we came together, and out of those conversations, we met again, and we added 4 more people. And so we wound up with 7 Wabanaki and 7 non-native, as well as our friend Frances from New Zealand, who herself is a writer, and she couldn't join us, so she committed her heart and soul to being an advisor for us and a support for me, certainly. And so, but I would say the biggest value that we all had in the beginning was that this was going to be our book. It wasn't going to be one person's book, and that everyone was going to be involved at every stage. So if I did an interview, I would transcribe that interview, and then I would send it back to you, Dana, back to whoever had done it, and say, is this what you meant to say? Is there anything in here you don't want? Is there something you want to add? And we would go that process back and forth. And then as it was crafted into a story, that would go back to you. This is why it took us so long. But we wanted to make sure that people had full authority, not only over their own story in the book, but over the book as a whole. So by the time we ended up with the Gatherings book, I do feel that people feel it is all of our book, and that was how we wanted it. We talked about, you know, there's a long history of non-native people coming into Indigenous communities and gathering stories, getting information, and going off and publishing a book, or making money off of it, or getting a degree from it, and not giving anything back. And we didn't want that. We wanted to be sure that everyone was involved in the beginning. And as Dana says, one of our planning sessions, well, 2 of them actually, was at his house. And I just thought you might describe, Dana, what it was like when we were just together trying to think about this book.
Well, it was an event. I remember at one point that I spoke up about something that happened, and everybody went quiet for a minute, because it was kind of like one of those things that was really touchy, and I didn't feel that I wanted to go there about it. And but nonetheless, we continued meeting, and we continued doing what we started out to do, and that was to complete this process, and so that we could get a book. Now, if they're planning on doing another part of this, then maybe there's something that could be done that could include some of the children in here.
We were just discussing before all of you joined us that there's a group of curriculum educators working on, will be working on a teacher's guide for the book, because we're hoping that it will be used in schools as well. And Dana and I were talking about, you know, the importance of bringing these ideas to young people and sharing our experience. We would very much like that to happen. You know, Dana, people have said in these kind of talks that, you know, we should think about why we would want people to read our book. And one of the things that I would like people to know is that we think it's pretty unique. The stories in here are in the participants' own words, Wabanaki and non-native. And I think one of the things that strikes readers is that we were vulnerable. We were open about our doubts and our fears, our hopes. And just as we were in those circles all those years ago. And, you know, I think one of the most important things about those circles was that no matter if it got tense, no matter if anger erupted, no matter if you know, people broke down crying, whatever happened, people stayed. No one left that circle. And we kept coming back day after day and year after year. And so I think it's really striking how open and vulnerable people were in the stories in the book. And that there's a real diversity of Indigenous voices in this book. There are people raised in urban, there's everything from someone raised in urban Connecticut to the northeast coast of New Brunswick, in a very isolated reserve there. So would you like to say some more about that, Dana? Like what you think is, why would people want to read this book? What's special about it?
Well, one of the comments I was just going to make in regards to the Indigenous part of it is that sometimes there was struggles that were brought to the circle, and we just didn't talk over it and keep on going. We'd stop, and sometimes we had to help the person who brought that issue to the circle, and so we offered, in a way, healing and in the spiritual context to people, and we would stop and not just talk over them and just be with them until everything was okay. And this is the important part of this, with a lot of people that in my opportunity and where I was involved, I've traveled all over the world with Indigenous people, for Indigenous people in those countries, and for a purpose. And they were we were bringing things back to them. I was bringing things back to them that was lost, so that they can pick up their circle and their fire and do the things that they wanted to do and needed to do today, because people, the Indigenous people, are suffering in the world today because they're not being respected. And we need to change that. Today, we need to stand all together, not differently. And that's the important thing. And that's why I was an integral part of this, because I felt that I needed to share my teachings, my knowledge with people that were willing to listen and not be critical of it, but be honored to hear it. And it's all done in a good way, you know.
You know, I would love to hear what you'd have to say. Barb Martin in the book, who is a Mi'kmaq woman, for our listeners, she talks about, she says, I'd been in a lot of circles that were just Native people, but these were different. And she had some really interesting observations about us as non-natives in circles. And I just wondered if you had some thoughts. I mean, you've been in hundreds probably of Native circles, but this was a mix. And I just wondered if you had some thoughts about that or memories about that.
Well, I probably have some memories. It just takes a minute to get it. But I think the idea of what you're asking is that, yeah, I saw a lot of positive reactions from the non-native people to the effort that was being put together in our circles. Because we were there not to be vicious or hurt anybody. We were there to be, of a good mind and a good heart and speak in a good way. And we shared deeply. And yet we all got up at the end of the day and gave each other a hug, because that was very important part of how we were to succeed in doing what we wanted to do and could do with people, and to open up the hearts of some of these people that needed to see it and feel it, so that was my feeling about it and my idea that we needed to do that. And I was there, I seen it. And there was one individual, and it's mentioned in my part of the book. And when it was stated that, well, what's wrong with being like us? And my comment back to him was, well, I said, look around you. And I says, and see what you're being led to understand. And I says, for us, we need to decide for ourselves who we want to be and what we are. Not to have someone else tell us, and look at your society. We needed to come back together as Indigenous people. And that was a lot of what I seen in the gatherings that we had. There was a strong support and an effort for the Indigenous people in the circles to be there and be respected. And that was important.
Yeah, and I think why we wanted to write this book and why we all put such effort into it is that we hope that people will read it and it'll be a model for addressing what I call the original sin of this country's formation, as well as healing other divisions between peoples. And that is some of the feedback that we've gotten, that people really feel that there's a lot of wisdom in what we learned and what we earned by being together. And that's what we wanted to do, was to share that. And we hope that it offers hope for people, for mutually beneficial relationships between Indigenous people and us descendants of settlers. I had someone at the publishing company, University of Toronto, say to me, he's a young man, I would say he's in his early 30s, and he said, he's on their staff, but he said to me, because they're very immersed in what's happening in Canada, they publish a lot of Indigenous studies, so they work with Indigenous people and on a regular basis. And he said, I had begun to feel hopeless that we could make real progress between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And he said, until I read this book. And he said, I feel hopeful again. And that was just one of the best things I've heard. So I thought, I know we want to make time for question and answer, but I thought you and I might offer a little reading from the book. Do you want to start, or would you like me to start?
Go ahead, you go first.
Well, I thought the pieces that I picked reflect the part where I talk about organizing the gatherings and what it was like to begin to get together. I am driving north. For the past several days, I have been amassing camping equipment, throwing not to be forgotten items into a duffel bag, shopping, baking, and talking for hours on the phone. The phone calls have been mostly with non-natives who have expressed an interest in attending a gathering for the first time. Since our decision to meet in a traditional council format around the fire, we have been strict about preparing first-timers. We want to make sure they understand that this gathering is about forming relationships and creating alliances, and not primarily about experiencing Native ceremonies. People find out about the gatherings through word of mouth. I send out invitations to those who have previously attended, announcing the date and location, and say that if they want to bring someone new, they need to prepare them. Often they suggest the newcomer call me. When they do, I carefully explain the taboo of cultural appropriation, and that under no circumstances should they take what they experience at the gathering and share it with others for financial gain or self-promotion. If you were to attend a Catholic service for the first time, I ask, would you feel qualified to go out and conduct a mass? Just one more paragraph. My own musings about how I was at these gatherings. Wabanaki participants, as well as non-natives, have come and gone from our gatherings, but there is now a core group of us who are attending regularly. Even with our increasing familiarity with one another and growing trust, there are countless moments of uncertainty and anxiety in our encounters. I constantly seem to myself to be too loud or talking too much. In phone conversations with Gisatanamuk, who was my partner in helping to plan these gatherings, I keep reminding myself to wait for him to respond before I go barreling into my next sentence. I have come to understand that his pauses are due to the fact that he is actually listening to and pondering my words before he responds, a manner of communication I'm not used to in my everyday hurried interactions.
That was good, Shirley.
Thanks, Dana.
The part that I'm thinking about here is in the book, in relationship to some of my many talks with the children in the schools, because the children are the future. And if we don't nurture them in the right way, then all will be lost, because we're seeing it now in this society today with this COVID, where the young people don't even want to go to work because the system is making them pretty happy and comfy. But anyway, this where I just want to talk from. It says, I talked with the students in a local school a little while ago. I spoke to them about all the important things that are happening today and how we need to think about the 7 generations to come. One of the teachers said, 7 generations, my goodness, that's a long time. I said, yes, imagine if you always had to think about 7 generations to come, what would you change in your decision-making process today? You wouldn't do the things that, the same things, would you? And then I said, if you think about what's going on today in this world, don't you think we should have started thinking about these things 7 generations ago? The prophecies say that this is a time when we are all to come together. The gatherings were an important and a coming out for me, a chance to speak about my culture and to learn about other cultures, a chance to find the heart connections that can exist among us. The gathering showed me the importance of our connections. They set me on the path. In recent years, I have traveled all over the world as a member of an international group of Native spiritual elders. I've seen the value in what we can share together. We need each other. We can pick up and leave the place here all along for the time being. And we're all here for the long run. Now, just recently, if you had been aware, they shot Captain Kirk into space and on one of those trips. So he's qualified now and to travel. And that's important, you know, and I think it's really changed his life because of it. That just that moment that he was able to go out into space officially after all these years, and Scotty didn't have to beam him up. And I think that the important thing for me is that when I went to Australia and I took 12 Indigenous people with me, and one of the most important things there was I took one of the elder Navajo ladies. I shouldn't say elder. She was teaching, she was approaching her medicine. And so I had to take her so that she could get the final piece of her circle to do that. And so we did that there. And at the same time, we had a chance to meet with the Aborigines. And I commented about the fact that Australia needs to do something about the Aborigines that they're not doing. And I got a call shortly after I got home from Australia that they had apologized to the Native women of Australia. And because of the way they were being treated, and that they need to change. And that was good. That was a real positive step for that country. And we were all in this together, and we got to learn how to get along in a good way, not this way that for hundreds of years now has not been good. And these people need to change their way of thinking and doing things. And because if we're going to survive, and if our children are going to survive 7 generations, then we need to think differently, for sure. And if it starts in a gathering in our circle, then that's where it starts, you know? So that's my wish.
That's my wish too, Dana.
Yes.
There's so much that the white culture has to learn from indigenous cultures. And, you know, if we don't do it, all of our survival, I think, is at stake. Well, I'm aware of the time, Em, and I think you wanted us to have the last half for question and answer. So here we are.
Excellent. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat and I'll read them aloud, or you can always unmute yourself and ask Dana and Shirley yourself. But let's see if we have any questions. Yes, go right ahead. I see a raised hand there. Go ahead.
Hello, I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
But first of all, I want to say thank you so much for sharing this time with us, and the readings, and in general, all the work that you have been doing. And I was very curious to know how has been the feedback that you've been getting from like younger generations in terms of your gatherings and also the book. Yeah, I would be very interested in hearing that from you.
Oh,
Well, from the young people, my perspective is that for many, many schools that I went to and talked about the Native people, the Indigenous people, and I talked about the future for them. And there was many, many questions and many letters I got from them all, and was glad that I came and offered this to them. And their feelings was that, yeah, we need to do something, you know, we can't go this way anymore. They want to be able to feel that they're going to have a life. I have 3 daughters, and I have a significant one at home. She's the boss. And then I have a middle one, and she works with all of the Native youth in the country, as well as a lot of the components of the Boys and Girls Club of America on the national level. Very good. And my youngest daughter is in the West. She had to go West first before she settles into what her responsibility is going to be. because that's the direction of our ancestors. So she's very culturally strong and all, and I think that's what's important. We're seeing a lot of the young people today are coming out and very interested in the culture and want to learn. And that's what we got to do. We got to keep it going, you know, and this was just a little tool, you know, that we put together, and it's taken an interest, you know, so.
And I can add to that a little bit different angle. I had a chance to present last week to the university cooperative extension, and cooperative extension is the part of the University of Maine that works out in the community. And a number of, they had a book group that had been reading the gatherings, and a number of the staff were, I would say, younger people. They were in their 20s and 30s. And a number of them work with the 4-H youth camps. So they work with young people. And they were very interested in the book because they felt that they wanted to know more about how to reach out to the Wabanaki communities in Maine and offer programs to Wabanaki youth or offer whatever resources they have. But they wanted to do it in culturally appropriate ways. And so the book had helped them to think about their approach. Like one of them said to me that she had come, now she was part of the university loves to evaluate everything it does. And she had come into this local Wabanaki community, but she had this, she was supposed to gather all this data and, you know, to show that she was serving this community and making a difference. But she said it felt really intrusive to her. And so in reading the book, it made her think about a different way of approaching that, to not be the one coming in and saying, this is the way it has to be done, but rather asking the community, how can we get the information I need, but in a way that serves that community as well. So I was just so pleased that it had made her think differently about how she was doing her work and helping her be more able to offer what she had to Wabanaki communities in Maine.
Well, I think one of the biggest things there is this intellectual knowledge, you know, and in being part to how you approach the protocol today. You just don't go in. We had a situation where a man came to our community, traveled amongst the elders, captured all of the language his way, and then took off. And then when he passed away, we tried to get the research back, and the daughter says, no.
I've heard about that.
We want $2 million for his work. And so that intellectual knowledge is very important, not only just for spirituality, but culturally, food-wise, everything, the environment, all of it. It's there. You know, we've seen many things happen in our community over the years. I have. And because I was in every home in the community 7 days a week, because I delivered the newspapers. That was a way to earn a quarter a week, something, you know. And but I grew up in the community seeing all of the struggles and the oppression, and it's there still, you know, to a degree. And I was opposed to when they put a bigger bridge over to our island.
Oh, were you?
And I said to them, I says, why are you putting a bigger bridge? You know, things are going across that single lane bridge pretty fast. When you do a double lane bridge, and it's going over twice as fast, you know? So we're still struggling. We're still struggling, you know, to try to be real people, to be respected and all. And that's a big thing. We're still not respected. We're not treated as a human being. Like, you know, I've done a lot of work in the military and otherwise, and still, you know, it's not on the same level.
Right.
When we brought our circle together, we were all on the same level, and we treated each other on the same level, but still not today yet. You know, they may shoot Captain Kirk into space, but still not on the level yet.
Right. We have a lot of work to do here.
Yes, yes.
Other
Thank you for
questions?
the answer.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. We can always read more from the book.
I have a question. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm not so digitally competent. Yes?
Yes.
My question is, I'm very impressed with your gathering circles and wondering if your model for native and non-native gathering circles of sharing, as you're describing, is functioning now, either following your work or in other ways, other groups doing this, because it seems to me this is the way for understanding and connecting hearts, as you describe, to come about.
Well, I haven't heard anything about any gathering. Now, I'm not a powwow person. I don't attend powwows because that's not my way. Because I feel that if people want to gather in a way similar to this, then you have to start talking. You have to ask people to, you know, in your area and in your circle, you know, let's get together and talk about things. Let's try to reason something out. And it's not the GOP parties or any of that kind of stuff, but just human beings meeting, you know, heart to heart and being able to talk about things that are going on. That's what we did. And that's why we're here today. Because if people are connecting with this thought, then that's the reason that other people need to come together to talk, you know? And who knows? You know, if somebody wants to talk and have something like this, then all they got to do is try to connect. You know, we'll send Shirley down.
You know, I love this question because I think that, you know, one of the reasons we wrote the book was because we knew that we felt like not everybody has the kind of time that we put into this. So in some ways we had a unique experience, but we wanted to take that experience and through the book, give others the same experience to the extent that we could. And I would say that I see more and more of not gatherings that last for years, but a gathering, and I think this is what Dana's implying too, you know, it doesn't have to be for 4 days around a fire. It's wherever people want to gather and want to spend time listening to each other. And, you know, I think we see results here in Maine. It was a coming together of a kind of Wabanaki and non-native social workers that actually gave rise to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission here in Maine. They worked together and they began to say, there is something really wrong with this system. And it was the first example of a grassroots Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Usually they're created from administration, from government officials, but this one grew from the grassroots before it got sanctioned by the tribal governors and the tribal chiefs and the Maine governor. So in a sense, that's an example, I think, of what can happen. Now, Alma in the book gives some great examples of how not to do circles. And she talks about how it had has kind of become a fad in some of the departments, governmental departments in Canada, to have talking circles. But she says, you know, someone will get up and take the talking stick and give it to the person they want to speak, and then they'll take it from them and they'll give it to someone else. And she says, I can't stand that. You know, that's not the way it works. But I will say that in doing research for our book, that I learned that one of the things that's grown out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada is this organization called Circles for Reconciliation. Now, I know even the word reconciliation is a controversial word, right, Dana? Because as Alma would say, you can't reconciliate if you never conciliated to begin with. And I think there's a lot to that. So more often you'll hear the term truth and healing, because there is healing in truth. And then if there's reconciliation, well, that's something that you strive for, but you can't assume it's going to happen. You have to put the time in. And so, but in Canada, there are actually circles for reconciliation that are supported as an organization, and people sign up for these, and there are circles of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people that meet for a certain period of time. And so that's actually supported by the government right now as part of the outgrowth of their TRC. So
I wasn't involved in that meeting in Maine here.
What's that?
The reconciliation meeting, I was not asked to be involved. I think they were afraid of what I would have to say to them.
Oh, are you talking? Oh, the one I was talking about, the social workers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Social workers and the state.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think these were actually people, they were just the staff. You know, they had worked together on these child welfare cases, and they started talking, realizing that this system was broken and it was doing far more damage than good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Others? That was a great question.
Em, you have anything to say?
Not at this point. Looking for final questions here. Oh, you know what I did forget to say in my intro? I forgot to mention that we discussed before the talk here that the book is a finalist for the New England Independent Booksellers Association Nonfiction Award this year, one of 5 finalists. So I just wanted to congratulate you two on that.
For saying that. Yeah. Yeah, we were really pleased to hear that. Migamahan in the book, and I gave a little 5-minute presentation to that Independent Booksellers Association way back in the spring, and so they must have paid attention. we were honored to be named. Yeah.
Well, I think there's more effort that needs to be put forth by individuals and otherwise in these matters. You know, it's just kind of a little step in the right direction to start to get people to understand the importance of the Indigenous people here in this land and in the future, not only for us, but for all that are here, you know, and we're already home and the non-native people aren't home yet. So that's kind of one of the points that we always have to mention, you know. So I feel that my effort is to try to help and to put things forward in a good way and have a good heart and a good mind to do it. And that's what we've been doing in trying to make the best of it. So.
Do you have a question there, Em?
Not that I can see, but if you're just about done, if we don't have any other questions, you ready to wrap up for the night?
Well, I was just going to share, Dana was, when Dana said we're already home, I just wanted to share an image. Maybe this was a way to close, but I don't know, Dana, have you been in the elementary school at Madot, which is Indian Township for our listeners, Passamaquoddy community?
No, because they have their own teachers there, cultural teachers.
Yes, that's right.
And
I
it-
just, go
and
ahead.
That's what you have to use, you know, for the community.
Mhm. Yeah, I
I
didn't,
attended the non-native schools because they had nothing in there that reflected on who we were. We were invisible.
well, this speaks to what you just said, because I didn't know if you had ever just visited that school, because I was at Madot, which is one of the Passamaquoddy communities in Maine, one time, and I was visiting Wayne Newell, who is in our book. And he used to be vice principal of the school, as well as a whole bunch of other roles in the community and outside the community. But he said, come on over and take a look at our school. I'll show you around. So we walked into the school and into the cafeteria. And if you can imagine an elementary school cafeteria, looks like most institutional cinder block walls. This is what I remember. But on one long wall of the cafeteria is a diorama, I think is the term. It's a glass box that's about eye level for elementary school kids. It's about 1 foot deep. And in my memory, it's about 6-7 feet long. And this glass box is mounted on the wall of the cafeteria. So these kids see this every day. And there have been many archaeological digs and studies in the area. And so the archaeologists, in collaboration with the school, had created this diorama, and it represented the approximately 12,000 years that the Passamaquoddy have been there. And so at each point in the diorama was something that had been found near that site that represented that era in history for 12,000 years. And I'm standing there looking at this next to Wayne, this Passamaquoddy man. And I just said to him, it was so moving. And I said, this is a belonging, a sense of belonging that I'll never know. And it just struck me that these children see this every day. And what an incredible gift and sense of belonging. And then they go outside of their community, and people don't even know that they exist, or people have all these misconceptions about who they are, or they're not allowed to be who they are. And I just, I think about that, and I think about how that really needs to change.
One of the things that I have in memory to a situation at Roostergush, and visiting with some of my friends there and work associates. And to have this young mother come in and her husband come in with a brand new baby. And the only language that baby understood was the Micmac, no English. And that's all that was taught to that baby already. And it was just a tiny little thing. But she acknowledged when the mother spoke in Micmac to her. And that was one of the most powerful things that I can put forward, because I think that is a clear example of what needs to happen, you know, and because we need to be identified.
And there's a whole worldview in that language that is different from ours.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So anyway, I think it's been a good evening, Em. I hope you're satisfied with.
Yes, thank you, Em, for this opportunity.
Absolutely. We've been thrilled to have you. I have one last question from the chat. Dan asks, he has Dana, if when we're in the very early stages of learning about Native American history, especially the interactions between European settlers and Native peoples in Maine, can you recommend a resource or two that would be a good starting place?
Well, they're doing a lot of work at the university in terms of putting a lot of the language together and putting a lot of the history together. And those are the things that are really important. My father was involved at the university, and he set up the Native program at the University of Maine. And my instructions to him was, before he passed, that put this in stone, because the minute you pass, they'll be looking to do away with it. And so there are people there that are capable of, talking with and looking for resources and all. And even in my work that I'm doing as an elder, my work is important as well. And in time, it'll show itself, But in the meantime, I do stuff like this as a point to make it, this awareness that we need to start doing things differently.
I'm just looking, in the gatherings, we have a pretty extensive bibliography and things that people have. It's not complete, but it was a collection of what had been recommended by all the people in the book. And I was just trying to think of some books that have come out. There's certainly some wonderful ones in terms of United States history and Indigenous peoples' history of the United States. I just pulled off here the Penobscot Dance of Resistance. And there's another book, particularly about the Penobscot, Dana, that I'm trying to remember the name of, and it's just slipping away. But you can find it in the back of this book, and as well as just by a good Google search. There's just so much now.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy around the church of recent times. And
yeah.
one of the most important pieces of information that I think that a serious person needs to look at is the reference to the Papal bulls and what they mean, and what they implied, and what it caused. And it's still today, and it's a direct impact on our who we are, because they're using it as the words of the doctrine of discovery, and that they have autonomy over us. We're still there, under that rule. I live on a small island in the river, and but it doesn't have a fence, but it's still covered by, when you first go on, the first thing you see is a church. So that's a big piece of work today. That's in and under this also, this doctrine of discovery in theory is the fact that the state of Maine used it in their land claims, saying they had power over us to do whatever they wanted to, and all. And that's wrong. The state of Maine owes millions and millions and millions of dollars to us, and they know it, but they do everything they can to deny it.
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that what Dana's talking about here, the doctrine of discovery, which is sort of where it all began. As he said, there is a brief description of that in the gatherings, but you can also read an awful lot about that online. it has basically the idea that explorers who came here had the right, sanctioned by the Catholic Church, to take the land. And that idea has filtered down through all of our legal judicial systems. It's written into our laws, and it is important to understand that.
Well, I think that, it's been for me. I've had an opportunity to meet 3 times with Steve Newcomb, the one that brought forward
Yes.
those documents to us. And I met him for the first time when he first came out with them. And I've met with him several times after, because it's part of that feeling that you get inside, that you can't do anything because somebody's always there interpreting the law. One of the things that I speak about quite often is the fact that, has anybody ever researched the Treaty at Utrecht or the Treaty of Utrecht? And that was done in Europe, this treaty. And the treaty was an economic treaty for all of these business people and barons and kings and queens and everybody else in Europe. And they couldn't talk to each other because they all spoke a different language. And so because they couldn't speak a common language, they had to develop the language so that they could talk to each other in that language. And that was the English language. And the English language was made so that it can be deceived. And that's what we're experiencing today. And it's one of those things they don't talk about. But if you look it up, you'll find it, and see. And because we've been suffering all of that for all of these hundreds of years. But look at the society today because of that. Now they're even, what was that on the CMP about reversing the law?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying only in English could we accomplish that kind of double talk.
There's many things that we as Indigenous people are having to look at and experience and to see. And so how do we do that? Because when we start to speak out, then we get threatened. And in here I spoke about my uncle and my grandfather and them going to the UN and petition for nationhood in the 50s. And they were told to go home, we can't receive you. And then when they came back home, the state says, you go sit down and be quiet, and yet here we are today. So something has got to change or we're all in trouble. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
We got to change. And in the prophecies, they talk that the Native people will be part of to help the country to get back on its feet. And whether that's spiritually or holistically or whatever, because somewhere down the line, it's got to change. You can't keep going the way it's going, So anyway, thank you for the opportunity, Em, for having us here.
Yes,
And
thank you.
for the other people who are in attendance here. And if they want to make a comment about something, Shirley's always there.
Excellent. Thanks so much, you
I'm
two.
going to give them your phone number if you keep that up. Thank you, Dana. This has been great to do this with you. Thank you so much.
Well, it's an experience.
Yeah, it is, isn't
I've
it?
never had to do something like this, but I've been threatened for years by friends of mine that I need to write a book, but it would involve more than one book because of my work that I've done, so, but in the meantime,
Good luck with that. We'll have to talk.
yes. Thank you very much for those that have sat and listened to us.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And
Yeah,
thank you, Em.
I hope you have some insight to this, and I hope it helps you to understand. And don't be afraid to cause your own circle. In the East, when you go to your center, your spiritual center, you go clockwise in the circle. If you lived in the West, to go to your center, you go counterclockwise to your circle. And that means your center, you know, for who you are and what you are. And spiritually, it's very powerful. You're in a very powerful place here. Just recently, I was on the shores of Nova Scotia on the Bay of Fundy. And I watched the whales come and greet us. It was beautiful, you know, to see that. So we have an opportunity here with the most easterly point in the United States. This is the land of the rising sun here. I had an opportunity one time in my visits on the coast to observe a supernova at night, and not with a camera or telescopes, but just being with the granite, and then have a supernova occur right over your head. One of those things that you say, do it again, do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it again, you know.
Wow.
And I've been all over the world, and I've been asking different spiritual people culturally, what does it mean to them? You know, to have an opportunity, as we hear, the only pictures we see is what comes from the Hubble telescope, you know, but to see one actually here on our lands, over our lands, to me, that has a very important meaning to us, you know. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. Safe drive home, Dana.
Yes, it'll be fine. I'll have a good ride.
Good, good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Em.
Thank you both, and have a good night, everyone.
Good
Okay.
night.